part of it is expediency, and part of it is recognizing an interesting opportunity that turns your crank. And honestly, the only reason I got involved with Humber is because I looked at what was going on. I realized there is no elite ad school in Canada. It didn't exist. It's like, okay, for me as an entrepreneur, this is gold, because I get a chance now to build this from the ground up with total greenfield, right? Greenfield, Blue Sea, whatever you want to call it, right? Because no one else is doing this. I mean, Humber had a copywriting program. That was basically it.
Wow.
And, so it's like, hey, great, we can do this and make something that wasn't there before. And for me, that was adequate compensation, because I was building something again. Mm-hmm. And it's like, okay, I can build this instead of that. All right, let's do that.
Yeah, you seem like a builder, someone who likes to start the company and not just sit and maintain it. Like those CEOs, I've heard someone say there's two types of CEOs: someone who builds it and then sells it or gets rid of it, and someone who's very good at looking at it and cutting fat, maintaining, and they're like that. Those two types of leaders when it comes to CEOs.
With a lot of startups, that's how it kind of has. You need two. Mm-hmm. You need the startup CEO, and then you need the maintenance CEO, and they aren't usually the same person.
Yeah.
No, I think the building thing, again, we always go back to your dad's, right? Like my dad's a cabinet maker.
Whoa, okay.
But he's a cabinet maker who started out as a stockbroker.
That's such a crazy story.
So this is maybe why I've never been uncomfortable with sort of deciding, I want to do something different. Because for the first 15 years of his career, my dad worked on Bay Street in a stockbrokerage. He was a stockbroker, and one day he came home and said to my mom, "That's it. I'm not going back. I just don't want to do that shit anymore."
Good for him.
And what do you want to do? Well, I like building things. And, and my dad actually probably, if he had had the right path put in front of him, he probably should have been an industrial designer. He's like this brilliant 3-dimensional thinker. Like, he builds stuff. It blows me away. I basically was a cabinet maker's apprentice when I was a kid, because he was a cabinet maker. And so if he needed help, he's like, me and my brother, well, come on, dude. Like, we're, like you're helping me deliver some shit or build things or whatever. So, but yeah, so like he had done a completely radical turn like that. So it was not that, it wasn't an unknown approach to life for me. And I was always really proud of him for doing that, because that was pretty cool. And, I grew up as a result of that with a whole bunch of interesting skills. And I think probably my love of building things came out of the fact that, that's what my dad did. He built stuff, right? And taught me how to build things. And so I don't build the same things he built, but I like building things. So,
How did you know English and literature and writing was your crank? Like, I feel like a lot of myself, again, 17, I didn't know. I loved all these things: photography, videography, podcasting, talking to people, but I never really knew what turned my crank. I still feel like I don't fully know. Did you know at a young age, and how did you know?
Well, I guess I always kind of did things that were in that realm as a kid, kind of without thinking about it too much. Like, I always drew as a kid. I was like in grade school and then in high school. I was always in like art classes, and I used to write a lot. In high school, I was like the editor of my school newspaper.
Cool.
All that kind of crap. And so I always kind of felt that I didn't know where or how it was going to go. I was actually, I always figured, well, I'll probably just be a lawyer.
What?
Yeah. Well, I thought, well, I wanted to study artsy stuff. But if I wanted like a job out of it, then, then like law is one of those places you can go if you are, at least moderately intelligent and want to make a living out of like playing with words the whole time. Because the first place I went to school actually after high school was I went to York in fine arts. So I did that for a year. And that was me kind of figuring out that I wasn't going to be a painter, but I really liked design.
Cool. Okay,
You
that's a
know,
good distinction. Yeah.
and there was clearly like I realized as much as I liked to do art, I was not an artist in the compulsive way you need to be an artist who is an artist as a calling, because I think it really is kind of a calling. But I love the work and I love the design side of stuff, and I like the design. I like the thinking of design. So I didn't know what to do with that, but I also realized that I didn't like being at York, so I took off and I traveled for a year.
Did that help? Did that take people talk about that all the time as like a big moment that helped them realize, almost like you said, give yourself that time to get away, to get in you to think what you want. I feel like people don't do that or have that option. It's 17, you got to go, or whatever
Oh
age.
yeah, yeah. And I don't know if you remember some of the people from the program that, like, I have repeatedly told people, leave, go, take a year, work, but especially travel. Just to get some perspective on things and to give your head, and because there's nothing bad can come of travel if you want to be a creative person. So what happened with me is that, I had the year at York, and I had a bit of a kind of a some I'd always call it a crisis of faith, but it wasn't really that, because I'm sort of not really Catholic, so it wasn't really religious, but it was like I gotta get away from this shit. And so there was a program that was on at the time called Canada World Youth. I don't know if you ever heard of it. So it was an exchange program, a third world exchange program. A good friend of mine had done it, and he'd gone to Senegal.
Cool.
And so he said, Ben, you really ought to look into this, because I think you'd be good for it. So I thought, okay. And I had the good fortune of actually getting into it. So I lived in Quebec for 4 months, and then I lived in Costa Rica for 4 months, and which were amazing experiences. And then I came home for about 3 weeks, and then I left again and went to Europe and spent the rest of that summer in Europe, like 3 or 4 months wandering around, just kind of randomly, right?
So you had no goal. You were just feeling.
There were actually there were two. One, I had a couple of relatives that in England that I needed to kind of just meet, basically, because I never met them before. And then apart from that, and I had some friends who were traveling, who were living in Brixton in London at the time, so I was going to go hang out with them for a bit. And then the other thing was, when I had been studying art history, I got really obsessed with Gothic cathedrals.
Oh, okay.
Really loved the form of them, and so I thought, well, if I'm here, I'm gonna spend like a lot of time, and I basically spent like 6 weeks or so just going from one town with one Gothic cathedral, and I had to do this alone because I would have driven anybody completely insane.
For sure.
And I'm going like from one to the other, and I'm just like immersing myself in this and drawing them and like doing all this kind of stuff, and it just like it blew my head off. It was amazing. I loved it.
Yeah.
Basically the whole kind of European circuit, and then came home. And after that, that's when I went to UT and sort of. But coming out of the Canada World Youth experience, which was very much sort of all about kind of geopolitics and the state of the third world and the responsibility of the first world to the third world. So that, which is one of the reasons that one of the first things I got into was political science and history, right? So I'm thinking, when I got back to school at UT, that's why I kind of went into that stuff, because I wanted to see, well, is this a path coming out of that experience that I want to follow up on? Do I want to work in the sector? Do I want to work in development? Do I want to, and then again, law was maybe one of those places that could go. And then I got sidetracked by literature.
That's so cool. It's almost like